Get to say good morning again. I love it. Love to say good morning again. So, usually I'm over there, and all you hear is my singing and playing, but there's a lot that comes from behind it. I joined the movement in 1975, and it was May 25th. I remember it strongly. That's the day when I recognized Father as the Messiah. I was only 19 years old, just out of high school. Anyway, that's been a long time. And there's been many, many, many highlights for me along the way. Too many to actually mention. So I won't go do that. I'll try to keep it a little shorter. Um, and to introduce more, I started piano in third grade, and I continued to play until I got tired of my teacher and said, I just want to play. And I stopped taking lessons. I just went on. I started playing guitar in seventh grade. Same thing happened. After 2 or 3 years, I just quit and said, I'm going on my own way. And I began to write songs. I went on into studying composition, theater production. Um, I even had a chance to attend Juilliard for about a semester. It's all the money I had. But it was a phenomenal experience to be with world-class musicians. I was standing in the lunch line, and there was this short, gray-haired guy in front of me. And the fellow behind me said, "Do you know who that is?" I said, "No, of course not." He said, "That's Isaac Stern." Who? The highest level people are standing right next to me. So all of this is, I think, because God was with me throughout my entire spiritual life. There was numbers after numbers of times when I really felt that something happened that was not my plan. It just happened, and I had to say, that must have been God doing something with my life. And I'm glad He did. Um, when I sat for dinner, the first time I sat for dinner down on Riddle Road in Cincinnati, if you remember where that is, some do, some don't. And I was sitting around the table having dinner with the members there, and they started playing a record. It was the music from the musical Godspell. And this one song, By My Side, I started to weep right there in front of them. I was like really embarrassed. They said, I can't help myself. I just, I'm just overwhelmed by emotion. I couldn't help it. So it was nice because if you know anybody knows who Joe Stein is, years ago he was watching me and he was like trying to figure out why is he just crying his eyes out, and I didn't know, he didn't know. My spiritual mother looked at me. She said, "They're not only your tears." Well, whose tears are they? They're just pouring out of me. What became obvious to me was that they were holy tears. I was chosen as a person to have the ability to feel the heart of the music and to experience the beauty of the music, which then continued for me throughout my time in the church. I went right away to New York City to sing for Father this one time at Belvedere, and I can remember how powerful that was. I felt like my entire ancestry was singing through me, but at the time they were choosing members for the New Hope Singers. The Father didn't choose me, but he mentioned me. He said, unfortunately, you're a little too young at 19 to join the New Hope Singers. He said, maybe you should get more experience. So that went on into being with the performing arts for over 15 years. And I sang and performed in front of Father many times, more than I can remember. So, but I never lost this feeling of emotion with the music. It's always been with me. You can see sometimes I can't help myself. I get all choked up over things. You know, it's just a powerful thing. So, but that didn't go without some kind of providence of restoration in my life. So when I joined, my number one question of all questions was, what is wrong with love? I tried love, I tried all kinds of different things, but there was always this gnawing question, so something's wrong with it. It's just not working. And I wanted to know what it was. So as I heard the divine principle, I realized for the first time that the tradition of love was not started or begun correctly. The tradition of love was meant to be unselfish love, not selfish love. And I realized, wow, that's exactly what I've been doing. You know, I've been only practicing selfish love, and it's never worked. So for me, that was like a revelation. God told me, yeah, this is what's going on. Now, I joined then, and I became a song leader. Now, one thing about the song leaders is that, well, first, you have to always be very positive. You have to always be filled with enthusiasm and energetic, and not every day do you feel like that, you know, but you have to somehow find the life to do that, to be able to bring people to life. And but when I was doing this song leading, I finally didn't realize it, but I got told off pretty much. Somebody really cut me pretty deep. We did an evening performance where everybody got a chance to sing, and that's something we used to do a lot. You know, everybody gets a chance to sing. And I just couldn't wait to get up because I had prepared myself. I was going to do a rendition of Rocky Mountain High with having memorized all the words and had all the licks down and everything. So I was going to blow the people away with this rendition. So then I got up and I did that. Oh man. And of course everybody, you know, really applauded afterwards. But the director of the program stopped me and said, I have a question for you. Okay, what's the question? He said, did you used to seduce your girlfriends with your music playing? What did you say? Tell me the truth. I want to know. How did you figure that out? He said, oh, it was easy. When you were performing, you only looked at the girls. You never looked at the guys. I had no idea that that was the tradition that I had been performing for years. And I knew at that point that I could not continue that. So I determined to give up performing altogether. I sent my guitar back to my parents, and they said, what's going on? You know, I didn't want to play anymore because I knew I first had to become right before I could continue to do something like that. So I had to give it up. 40 days I didn't play any music. I made a condition to stop completely and just become spiritual. So it wasn't far after that that things began to happen in New York City, and I was able to join the Go World Brass Band, and we went to Yankee Stadium and performed there. And I wasn't able to play guitar or sing. All I played was cymbals. It's a very symbolic mission. And if you have ever watched the Washington Monument movie, have you ever watched it? Well, the Go Roll Brass Band's doing Stars and Stripes Forever. And at the very end, there's this big reprise, and my calling card was to throw the cymbals up and down like this. And if you ever saw the movie, you saw me doing that. So that was my symbolic mission. So, but it was a very powerful experience to watch thousands and thousands of people come before me. So, but eventually I got back into doing song leading. Now the problem with a song leader is that you can't just do the songs and then leave, right? Yeah, that's not very good. That's not a good standard. So I had to sit and listen to the lectures. Can you imagine how many Divine Principle lectures I've been through? I can't count them. I've heard Divine Principle so many times because I had to sit and listen. And I've heard Divine Principle talked and taught by so many different lecturers. And I inherited so much from each lecturer that I decided I wanted to teach Divine Principle as well. And I became a principled lecturer at that time. And even in Chicago, I taught 7-day and 21-day workshop. So there's so much about the principle that I learned. But there's one fundamental thing that I've learned after all of this, and that is that Father wants us to be one with God. So that's the pursuit that I've been after. And to know God is not that easy. To know God's heart isn't that easy. When I was in Russia, we were there for the Twin Lakes workshop. We were teaching Russian students. And at the time, I was a team leader, and I had, 5 or 6 Russian students, and many of them were very interested. But you could always tell there was one that was not as interested, and he was like always watching me. And we would sit together and say, let's pray first. And before I even finished, he said, could I ask you a question? So how do you know you're not just talking to the air? How do you know God is actually there listening to you? How do you know that? You're just praying, but you're talking to the air, as far as I can see. How do you know God is there? And I couldn't answer his question. I wanted to, but I couldn't, because it was a good question. How do I know God is there? How do I know God at all? And so I asked him to wait, and I would find the answer for him. Now, the Russian students were really difficult because they didn't want to sleep at night. They didn't want to sleep at all. They wanted to stay up and talk. And they were around the campfire, and they were always talking, and we wanted them to go to sleep, but they refused. They were always talking, and because they'd fall asleep in the lectures, and we didn't want them to do that either. And so I got really upset with this, and I ran down to the lake where they were having their campfire, and this same member who was the one that challenged me, he was there, and he was the ringleader. So I said to him straight up, I said, why aren't you in bed, you guys? He stood up, and he looked at me, and he walked straight up to me, and he looked in my eyes, and he said, you Americans. Oh, I felt it right. Whoa. All you have cinemas, you have radios, you have TVs, you have entertainment, you have cars, you have this, you have so much. And look, we have nothing. All we have is each other. Again, I was very judged. I realized I was so far off. They were holding on to one another with all they had. Just to talk was good enough. Just to share about their lives or what they've been through. That's what they lived for. That's all they had was one another. The camaraderie that they felt was all they wanted. And I came away thinking deeply about what meant the most to them was their friendship. Their friends is what they wanted, it's what they needed. And then it hit me. So I asked this brother, how hard is it for you to find a really deep and good friend? How long does that take? Oh, he says, it takes a lifetime. Someone who knows everything about you. You know everything about them. That takes a lifetime. You can't find that out in a short period of time. It takes a long period of time. I said, finding God's heart is the same. You can't expect to find it so quickly. Unless you make some effort and try at least, start somewhere and sit down with God and have a conversation. You can't expect to know his heart. It's the same as an old friend. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. And he understood for the first time what he wasn't doing. He wasn't making any effort. Another day or two later, I found him up on the hill praying. We sometimes forget who we are. Father has invested his whole life to give us an inheritance of what is God's heart. It's right here. Page 238. And this is my Divine Principle book from 74. I'll read this to you. It says, I therefore cannot become the individual body having accomplished the purpose of the providence of restoration. In order for me to become such a historical victor, I must know precisely God's heart. I didn't put it there. It's there. You must know God's precisely his heart when he worked with the prophets and the saints, the fundamental significance of his calling them, and the providential missions he entrusted to them. I realized I was way off. I didn't even know his heart, and I needed to make more effort. So that's why I'm talking about the pursuit of oneness with God, because that's what it's all about. Jesus spoke, and you can bring that up if you want. Matthew 22:36, what did he say? There's two great commandments. The first one is to love God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind. The first thing you think is, well, why should I love God? He should be fine. He's got so many people loving him already. I don't think he needs me to. Why should I love God? It's a good question. And the second one is that I should love others in the same way. Now, this is Jesus. Now, that's 2,000 years. What do you see in the same as Father was telling us? You need to know God's heart. You need to love God with everything you've got, and then turn around and love others. That takes power. So, where does true love come from? Go ahead. Can we read this? This is Father's words, January 9th, 1983. What is true love? It is God's love. What is the path to true love? To become the owner of true love, we must possess God and his attributes of eternity. It is as simple as that. Why? Because true love has the quality of eternity. Therefore, to meet the condition of true love, we should be eternal. We will have true love between us only when our love is eternal. Therefore, on the path to true love, it is obligatory that we become eternal and unchanging people. Thus, love is eternal. It is eternal, unchanging, and unique. Therefore, when we have that kind of eternal heart for heaven, our path will lead us to true love. And true love that is all in all. And the next one? What is the holiest thing in the world? It is true love. True love begins from God. God desires the path of true love above all, not any other path. God wants to see, hear, eat, and touch through true love. Were you to receive a kiss from God, you would feel such joy and happiness as if your insides were about to explode. Wow. Gee, I would love to get a kiss from God. I think that would be nice. And, think about it also. We give the pledge, right? How many? There's 8. And at the end of every one of them, it says, centered on true love. So it must be a very important thing for us to know God so that we can possess God's true love. For what reason? To go out there and to love others. Jesus spent so much time with people who were unlovable. I respect him so much for that. He didn't sit up in some of the mansions in the highest realms. He went to the ghetto, and he loved the people that were there so that they would feel the heart of God for them when they thought that God had lost interest in them. He went there for that reason. He wanted to show them God's heart for them. And he healed them and showed them that God does love you in spite of yourself. So I saw myself being led in this direction over and over, to know God's heart and to experience it. Especially when it comes to having a family. Would you like to see him? This is my son and his wife. And she's actually better than him. He did well to choose someone actually better than himself. And he'll admit to that. They're living in Seattle right now. And the next thing is this one. That's Ellery Ann. She's 10 months. And they're so in love with that little girl. You have no idea. And I remember telling my son that when you have a child, something will change inside of you. For the first time in your life, you'll understand what it means to know God's love, because that's what it feels to have a child. Your life will change. You'll never be the same. And then that's my daughter, Felicitas, and her husband. Again, she chose someone better than herself. And the degree she's now a registered nurse. And she graduated summa cum laude, the top of her class. So that's my family. And I have to admit, to bring them this far, after everything that we've experienced in our lives, is a phenomenon. It really is. They turned out much better than me. So I'm really grateful in that respect. Um, but in order to bring that about, I had to do some changing. When I was in Cincinnati recently, I had the opportunity to work in the ghetto. And I did this intentionally because the people that I met from the ghetto, I was always repulsed by them. They were homeless. They didn't clean. They, were just always off, their heads. They had no hope. I had a hard time loving people like this. So I joined up with a group called Talbert House in Cincinnati, and that's what they do. They help people on the street. And they provide them with education and the wherewithal to make something of their lives. They even provide housing. My job was to improve their housing. I was the superintendent for maintenance for many of the buildings there. Means I had to go into where they lived. And, it was always a challenge for me because most of the time their apartments were dirty. They hadn't been cleaned. They had a smell. I mean, I had to do work inside of their apartments. I just was amazed at how it was so hard to even be inside. But God sent me there so I could understand his heart for them. So I could understand how it feels like to live that way. I'd never lived that way. And to serve them and to love them in spite of their conditions was what I was being asked to do. And I did it 10 years in a row. Over and over, I went into apartments where I just couldn't stand it almost. But in the midst of that hell on earth, I tried to create heaven because I felt God's heart for them. And many times, they were smiling when I left. They were grateful I came because there was no barrier. I opened my heart to them and just served them unconditionally. And in a way, I broke through where people would come to me and smile and say, "How are you?" on the street. They would recognize me. So I did this intentionally. And I'm grateful that I did. To love the unlovable. That's the heart of Jesus. And so, to know God's heart is what we're after. I'm saying you have to know all the parts of God's heart, every bit of it. Then you can go anywhere in the world and you can love others. I really wanted to know what more that God wanted me to do. So he revealed to me in Thessalonians 1, 10 and 11, work with your hands. Live a quiet life. Read this verse sometime. It's very good. Live a quiet life and work with your hands. And I'd been doing that already, working with my hands, so that you would gain the respect of many people and that you would be able to want for nothing. So, all right, so Father's asking us to live for the sake of others, right? So, but you can't go out and give to others if you haven't already got it. You can't give what you don't have, which is what I was thinking. In order for me to be able to give to others, I first have to gather. And this is what Jacob did. Did you know that? Imagine if you were in Jacob's shoes. First of all, he had a death threat on his head. He was going to die. His brother wanted to kill him. So what did he do? This is so phenomenal. It's a paradigm. Jacob, first thing he did, right? He sent everything he owned. But he didn't own that from the beginning. He accumulated it. He worked hard for it. And he accumulated it. But then what did he do? He didn't think, this belongs to me. He gave it all away to his brother. So you imagine, Esau's up there with his sword in the air, waiting for Jacob to come around. He's going to kill him. What does he see? He sees all the cattle and the sheep, and the servants are coming and they're offering him everything. It's, my goodness, what's going on here? The very birthright that he wanted back from his brother was being given back to him to inherit everything. But Jacob had to first gather that together before he could give it. So he did gather it. And then he sent his family, his children, his wives. Here's Esau with his sword in the air. And the kids are running up to him saying, Uncle Esau, pulling on his pants leg and says, let's go play together. And the wives, the beautiful wives and other children, Esau's like, whoa, this Jacob must be somebody different. Whoa, look at this, the kids, everything. And then finally Jacob came and bowed 7 times before him. Now, it would have been easy for Esau to cut his head off. And he stood before Esau, ready to die, and said, to see you is to see the face of God. Poor Esau was stuck, because what he saw in front of him as he looked in Jacob's eyes, he didn't see his pimple-faced, unruly teenage brother that he knew 21 years ago. He saw in this man's eyes that he had become someone. Jacob, you've changed. I can't kill you. I can't. I want to be a part of your family. I've received everything I wanted. It's right here. Before we go out to live for the sake of others, we first must have something to give. What is it that we have to give? Each one of us have to ask ourselves that question. What is it that I have to offer others? I want to live for the sake of others, but what do I have? What's our best talent? What do we have? What have we accomplished? What do we have to offer others? We cannot stop from doing that. And so, what do we have? One thing we have is an inheritance from God, an inheritance from True Father, that we know God's heart. Unusual, huh? Such a collection of people, but we are special in that we know God's heart and that we have experienced it. And therefore, we can go to others and say, yeah, I've inherited something. I know God's heart. I'm really fortunate, and I'm going to finish with this. My talents have led me to become a piano technician, and I am successful. And the reason why I think also is that I look forward to meeting new people every day. I get that opportunity. I get customers every day where I can go out and I go into their homes. That was home church from the get-go. We needed to go into their homes and be a part of their home. And the hardest thing to do was to get inside their home. And so I devised this idea: if I were a piano technician, I would have to go in to tune the piano, but then I would get to meet the dog, and the children and the wife, and then just be there with them in their home and just share the joy of being able to do something for them that they cannot do for themselves. It's a beautiful experience. And then to sit and play for them afterwards. And they all just go, wow, that sounds beautiful, And then they're so grateful that you came. But more than that is that they feel something from you. If we know God's heart, we realize that we can have an effect on others that they don't expect. Because we possess the heart of God, we can love them from God's point of view. It's a blessing to be able to do that. That's the reason why I have so much enthusiasm and energy. Because I'm going out there every day meeting new people. And I'm in their homes and I can pat their dog, and there's so much energy in that. I can't stop. I should, at my age. I'm 67. My birthday was yesterday. I should stop, but I can't. I can't help myself. I look forward every time to going to a new person's home. What's going to happen? Who are they going to be like? How can I learn to love them? It's a practice of living for the sake of others, and I'm so grateful to do that. And so, if all this is making sense to you, we have the inheritance of knowing the heart of God. True Father has given us that. Jesus wanted us to, and he told us to, love God and establish that relationship of love with God. Therefore, you inherit from God true love. And that true love goes with you wherever you go. That true love stays with you wherever you go. So, we shouldn't have a problem sharing the presence of God with people. It should be natural. Naturally, we are who we are. You say, what makes you do these things? I was asked this many times. Why do you do this sort of stuff? You're not being paid for that. Why do you do it? And all I answer is, I was trained by the Messiah. I was trained by the Messiah.